Hey, what's up, guys? It's Rico here, CEO of SourceFind Asia, host Made in China podcast, and the host of the SourceFind Asia YouTube channel, of course. Back with another one, chilling by the pool, about to go for a swim. And I wanted to record a video, an update video, on why it's dangerous to negotiate too much with your suppliers.
I notice when I walk outside, I hope this pays off. One day I chose it, one day, someday I hope it. Went in the big labels and saw plaques on walls, but I didn't post it. Didn't wanna gas or boast it, that's not one of the things I'm made of. But one day will it pay off? Mum says I got to do music, and dad says to not quit my day job. It's a hard one still, it's not fake, the bars are real. Sometimes I can rely on people's advice, I can't rely on pills. I notice now, things keep falling down. When they fall, I still build them up. Hard when you don't know how. Something's changed, yeah, you know the deal. At the end of the day, I'm over that one still. Over that one. When I play shows, I'm sober at none. Not from London, no, the accent. Not just talking, loads of action. Is this music or is it acting? One step forward, then go backwards. Think it makes me over anxious. Things can change, it's known to happen. I feel like I don't need people's help. And then when I think about it, I'm proud I could have been someone else.
So as I mentioned, this is a 2020 update. I recorded a video about this probably in 2018 or 2017. So if you want to watch the original, you can go back and check it out and come back to this one. So the first point I'm going to start off is, it's a very tempting thing, I think, for a lot of clients or buyers, should I say, to want to negotiate a lot with China. I think the days of cheap China are over. I still think China is one of the cheapest places, or least expensive places to get products made on a mass scale, but it's not as cheap as it used to be. And the suppliers are not as willing to bend over backwards for your business because their margins are lower. The orders that they get are smaller. If you're talking about during COVID-19, the amount of clients that they're getting right now are smaller. So factories are less willing, just to set the climate and mentality. Right now, factories are less willing to take on projects where they could potentially lose money. A lot of times they would hedge their bets. If it was a new client and the client was starting off with a smaller order, they might break even, or they might just make a little bit of profit on the basis of hoping that this client is going to become a repeat customer. So it's really, really important that you have that in mind when you're negotiating with suppliers. You're only coming from a position of power if you're going to be coming in with a large order. If you're coming in and maybe placing multiple POs at the same time, then POs meaning purchase orders, then yeah, you do have more room for negotiation. I think negotiating too much causes more harm than it does good in general, because you're already just setting a bad tone with the supplier. Like, if you haven't even started working with them, you haven't shown any sort of seriousness towards the project, and you're already trying to get money off, a lot of clients, a lot of factories will be put off by that. I think the first thing you have to do is just make sure that you're negotiating from a position of power. So like I said, either you're placing a large order or multiple POs. And even during this time period, sometimes it's still difficult to get pricing down. Beyond that, I think that you need to, like, if your price point is $5 and you find a factory that's $8 or $9, it's going to be extremely difficult to bring the price down to $5. So you do want to find a factory that's already 5 or 6 or 5.5 or whatever. And then that way, you're either going to be coming lower than your target or right about in your target. So I think that's the second point of negotiating from a position of power. Some of the things that heavily affect pricing, especially right now, would be labor costs and raw material costs. And of course, with COVID, the factories are not running at full capacity, even though they're very close to normal. A lot of factories are not running at full capacity. A lot of factories went out of business, similar to the service industry. A lot of restaurants, a lot of nightclubs and things like that have gone out of business during this difficult time. So it's the same thing with the factories. They're very much cash-intensive businesses, and multiple months of slow turnover has ruined a lot of manufacturers. And then also the requirements that the government had for these factories to sort of improve their systems to be more safe for the workers. a lot of factories just couldn't be bothered to implement that stuff. It's just like, why would they spend the money? They want to ride off into the sunset with the money that they'd already made. And then some factories completely reinvented themselves and focused on creating PPE products. A lower amount of factories, and then the factories that do exist, very few of them are running at 100% capacity. Sometimes just because they're not even allowed to. You know, with the new safety codes, you can't have as many people working in a confined space as it was before. So that's another aspect, is just the labor costs, the production capacity. A lot of those things are lower. So that being said, you really have to almost sell your project to factories these days. Like, in fact, a lot of factories will turn down the projects just because they're like, look, we have to make sure that we're able to survive this year, so we can't be taking on projects that are going to cost us a lot of money to actually do, and there's no guarantee that we're going to make that money back in the long term. The short-term mentality is a little bit higher than it normally is, because I feel like that's the same thing with a lot of businesses right now. We have clients as well that are coming to us that ordinarily would have been able to afford our services, but now they're thinking, if I pay this, what's going to happen next year? So, the suppliers in China are thinking about the same things that we are. Going back to the cheap is China point, I have an expression that I always use. It's called cheap is expensive.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
It is what it sounds like, right? Like, if you buy a cheap product, you cannot expect that product to be a high quality product. You get what you pay for. And I think it's the same thing in China. If you're buying a knockoff MacBook or you're buying a real MacBook, you're going to get what you pay for. MacBooks are made in China, some of the most expensive laptops in the world. iPhones are made in China, some of the most expensive phones in the world. The camera that I'm using right now is Canon 77D, is made in China. You can get the most expensive stuff in China. You can also get the cheapest stuff in China. I could have easily bought an imitation Chinese brand camera. If it stopped working after 3 months, well, I can't really complain, right? Because you get what you pay for. So cheap is expensive. So if you're trying to produce high-end goods, you are going to pay a premium for that. And you're going to have to figure out how you can work within your margins. It's going to be very difficult for you to find a factory that's going to be extremely high quality and then, sort of come in at the low end of pricing. It's just not a realistic thing. So again, the days of cheap China are over. So cheap is expensive. It's really important. Another supplier tip in terms of negotiation is do your research. Make sure that you understand how the product is made and all the various costs that are involved. Because if you have something like a camera, like I just mentioned, there are so many components to making a camera, right? Like, it's not just a plastic box that has, a lens. Like, there's electronics involved inside, there's the glass components, there's the metal components, there's the electrical side of things, there's the plastic casing, there's rubber, there's so many different aspects, and all of those intricate details that go into a camera. There's the lighting, the flash, and all that stuff, the bulbs, and all that stuff is stuff that is made by different suppliers. And it requires different molding, it requires all these different aspects of work. So, like, it's multiple factories putting together one product. And if one of those factories is going through a difficult period and they want to increase their prices, if their raw material supplier increases the prices for those goods, it's going to increase everything across the board. So that's why a lot of times people get surprised, because you're dealing with the factory. Sometimes you're dealing with the assembly house. They might make some of the components, but they're buying it from somewhere else. So a lot of times people get surprised when their pricing shoots up like 20-30%. And then the factory's just like, yeah, the raw material cost went up without really much explanation. A lot of times what that means is our multiple suppliers of components that we're buying, one of them or two of them have increased their prices, and we have had to increase our price to sort of compensate for that. So if you can figure out what the different components are of the product, and don't be shy to burn through some suppliers by doing this, because what we'll do sometimes is we'll basically, if we're talking to 30 suppliers, the first 5, we're literally studying how the product is made by asking them a bunch of questions. And then by the time we talk to the 6th or 7th factory, we actually sound way more professional, and we actually have a better idea of how this product is put together and all the different parts to it. So when you know that, then you can figure out which one of these aspects, which one of these components is really driving up the price.
I'm over that one still.
Bare times I think what's the point? Do or die's a flip off the coin. I've I've come too far to turn back, so win or win is my only choice. I release songs they think it's for them, it's a cry for help but they miss the point. What's mad is when I speak for them, I feel like I lose my voice, yeah. But I can't linger or dwell on things. Yesterday's gone, it's been better since. Still outside and I'm settled in. Still more scared than I ever been. Still feel blessed like I never sinned.